We have a lot to get to, and every now and then you sort of stumble into something you refer to as a general manager's day, where all the topics of the show, all the big, chewy, meaty stories are all GM stories. Like sometimes there are coaches' days, sometimes there are players' days, sometimes there are fans' days, etc. And then some days there are general manager days. So it's perfect. We kick off Burke Fridays today with Brian Burke, former general manager and now the executive director of the PWHL's Players Association, because he's been there as a manager, he's been there as an agent, he's been there as a longtime hockey observer, and he's going to join us each and every Friday today, the maiden voyage. Oh, I should point out as well, he's also an author of Burke's Law, A Life in Hockey, which I recommend every hockey fan has on his or her bookshelf. Please welcome to the program for the first time, Brian Burke. Burke, how are you today?
Good, Jeff. How are you?
I'm good. I understand you're at Mattamy Athletic Center, the former Maple Leaf Gardens. Before we get into all the Trouba and the Adams and Luke Richardson and Sorensen and Chicago stuff for today, what's it like being at the old Maple Leaf Gardens?
Well, it was very noisy till before we went on the air. This is amazing. They must have exams. There's so many people in here. It
Yeah.
sounded like the Okanagan Hockey School. And now it's nice and quiet. So I love coming here. It makes me think of my old boss, the late, great Pat Quinn.
Over the course of these Fridays, we're going to get a lot of stories in about Pat Quinn. I believe, really quickly first, I believe, wasn't Pat Quinn somehow involved in your no tie look or the tie around the neck look?
That was mainly because I worked with Pat. I went there early. I went in at 6 in the morning. Pat would come in around 7. He'd tell me what he wanted me to do for the day. I'd go downstairs, work out, put on a suit, and I'd run up, getting back to work. I never tie the tie. I
Yeah.
would tie it when I had my first meeting, sometimes at 10 o'clock in the morning, sometimes before the anthem. And then I just gave it up out of sheer laziness. So, yes, he was at fault for that.
Uh,
He wouldn't have approved, though. Pat was a very neat man.
he was a very buttoned down guy, and he had a very specific way of doing things. We always talk about, we'll get into this at a later date, managers who leave a legacy of other managers that follow after. And when you look at Pat, whether it's yourself or George McPhee or Tambellini, etc., like there's a legacy of general managers that Pat Quinn left to populate the NHL. Okay, so the news of the day is an interesting one because you were involved in a situation like this back in 2005. And before we get to your trade with Doug McLean, Columbus and Anaheim, just want to get your thoughts on this Jacob Trouba situation. So it's not exactly a secret that in the offseason, the Rangers were trying to move Jacob Trouba. He has a modified no trade clause. He was able to block it. So it got to a point this season with the New York Rangers where I suppose Chris Drury felt like this was untenable. Something had to change. And the threat was if you don't agree to waive your no trade, and he did, he's now a member of the Anaheim Ducks, we're going to put you on waivers. First of all, how do you feel about that move by Chris Drury?
Well, it's within the rules. And
Yeah.
I did the same thing with Thomas Carberlay. When Thomas Carberlay wouldn't waive his no trade when I was in Toronto, I told him he's played his last game here. I can't trade him, but I don't have to play him. I don't have to dress him. So I told Thomas, you either waive your no trade or you sit next to me in the press box and wave at the cameras. And so we got him out of there in a hurry. And Thomas Carberlay is a great kid. This
Yeah.
is within the rules. People may not like it, then change the rules. Let's trade this for the 4-year college rule.
That would be an interesting bargaining chip, but that's the point that I've been making all along with this one. Like a lot of people, I know Aaron Ward on Twitter was very vocal about this one. Like the big story here is I don't like the word fair. I don't think the word really exists. Nothing's fair. You only get what you negotiate. And I look at this Rangers situation with Trouba and I say to myself, no one did anything wrong here. Chris Drury was well within his rights to put the player on waivers or indicate to the player that I'm going to put you on waivers unless you waive your no trade. I don't have a problem with any of this. I know that Trouba may be sour. Maybe this upset the room more, but it's not as if the New York Rangers are, lighting the NHL world on fire right now, Berkey.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts anyone. I think it's within the rules, so it's okay. It's like people complaining about guys being on LTIR. Within the rules, it's okay. And
Yeah.
Jacob Trouba is a good kid. He's going to find out. He's going to think, oh, Anaheim, they don't win. They don't do this. he's going to find out it's a marvelous place to live and work. And a good coach, a good GM, he'll like it there a lot. He may not think that's the best place for him to go. Wait till he gets off and walks down a beach instead of sitting in a cab on Seventh Avenue.
Well, I'll tell you, like all of a sudden, that Anaheim blue line, we always talk about, and I know you like defensemen like this, we talk about crushers on the blue line. Think about a blue line that has both Radko Gudas and Jacob Trouba on it, Berkey, for 1 second.
Well, you'll keep your head up. I know that. The other teams are going to keep their head up. You've got to know when guys like that are on the ice. And he's more than a crusher. He can move the puck. He's not a power play guy, but he's an elite penalty killer. He's a good player. He's physical. He's a leader. He's captain of the Rangers. This guy brings a lot to the party. I
Are
like
you?
I like this. I like the fact that Chris Drury got back that much cap room, and
Yeah.
Anaheim managed to get a player this good for this low a price.
You know, one of the things here to this one is, and I talked to one team this morning who said, like, don't be surprised if the Rangers get something for Trouba. I think a lot of us were under the assumption that this was just, they just wanted to move Trouba and get the cap space. So Chris Drury had some more wiggle room. I mean, Anaheim took the full freight. Euro Vakanainen goes back the other way. Defensive defenseman making just over $1 million. A pick going the other way as well. They it's going to sound weird, but they got something for Jacob Trouba, and they got something for and still unloaded the entirety of that contract. Like that to me is a stunner in all of this, that the Rangers didn't have to eat any part of the deal.
Well, it's a win-win because they didn't have to eat anything other than 1.1. They moved back,
Yeah.
so they saved that much. But I think he just had a year or two to go on the contract. This has 7 years left, if I'm not mistaken. So, but I think it's a win-win. I really believe Chris Drury needed the cap room, was not happy with the way they were playing. Jacob Trouba might be a guy he likes, maybe not. But I think it makes sense to move him and keep Chris Kreider. Now you have cap room to go get another defenseman. And Anaheim added a player. So let's say you say, well, he's not worth $8 million. Let's say he's worth $6 million. The cap's going to go up. He's worth $6 million, and you overpay a little bit to get a quality guy. Everyone in the league does that. So win-win. Let's move on. Let's play.
It is part of the, like, if you're Pat Verbeek, and listen, you had Pat Verbeek when you were running the Hartford Whalers. If you're Pat Verbeek in this situation, is there not a concern that this player had indicated, I don't want to go anywhere else? That this is not a player that's going to Anaheim or would have been going anywhere else, rumored Columbus, for example. He's not going there. He's not going there with a smile, essentially. Does that matter at all? I mean, listen, the Rangers did this with Barclay Goodrow, right? With the San Jose Sharks. Is there a concern from the manager's point of view that Trouba pretty much indicated to everybody that he doesn't want to go anywhere?
Well, part of it is Jacob Trouba has a complicated situation with his wife, who's a medical student. So they've got to work out a medical school solution for Jacob Trouba's wife, which, by the way, knowing the Samuelis, they probably did that while they were flying there. They have great ties to the community and the medical community in Southern California. They would have been able to put something together for Jacob Trouba's wife in about an hour. So relieve that issue. Let's see how much he likes it now when he starts walking on a beach and his wife's in a new medical school. So I think people, I've had players say, I'd never play there. Then I get them, they're like, I'm glad I came here.
Yeah. I want to get into your time with Anaheim here in a couple of moments, but let me ask you about a deal that when we started to hear the sort of the threats of I'm going to put you on waivers and you'll lose all control of any process, I immediately thought of you and Doug McLean. Doug when he ran Columbus and you when you ran Anaheim, and the Sergei Fedorov deal, and putting Todd Marchand on waivers to see him go through, back on waivers again to see you claim him. What was, like, that was the beginning, I believe, of that was the genesis of the no movement clause. But what are your recollections of the Fedorov deal and Todd Marchand?
Well, when I was talking to Doug McLean about we wanted to move Fedorov, and Sergei Fedorov was a great player, but he was done with us. He had just given up playing hard for us. So it's time to move on. And when Doug McLean called and said that's what he wanted, we put the deal together, put Francois Beauchemin in the deal.
Yep.
The last part was he said, you need to take Todd Marchand. And we loved Todd Marchand as a player. He was a key part of our cup team. But we couldn't afford it. So we said no. So he said, I'm going to put him on waivers. I said, I'm not taking him if you put him on waivers. So they put him on waivers. We didn't take him. Everyone thought, oh, the league threatened him. The league didn't threaten us. They just said, if you take him, we're going to investigate. We didn't take him. I told Bill Daly, we're not going to take him. They put him on a second time. I said, we love this guy. Why can't we take him? We're taking him. So we took him. League looked into it. No problem.
At the same time too, like that was the beginning. All of a sudden, like players and agents around the NHL, like the no trade was one thing, but this was the sort of manager's way around it and taking control away from the player. Like, at that point, to your recollection, was this not the beginning of players no longer asking for no trades, but negotiating no moves in their contract?
I think it was the first case where teams started to respond by doing that. Yes,
Yeah.
I think that Todd Marchand was the reason for this change.
How was Marchand when he got there? Because I know that he reluctantly went, but at the same time, he won a Stanley Cup with you guys in '07.
Well, not just that. He went from Buffalo or Columbus, which is a lovely place to live, and he loved it there. You get a half acre in Columbus for $400,000. Half
Mm-hmm.
acre's a ranch in Southern California. So it's very different for him. The cost of living, housing. He had about 18 kids, so they were reluctant to come until they got there. And again, you're going to practice in the morning. Keep in mind, go to practice in the morning in Columbus. It might be cold, it might be dark. That doesn't happen in Southern California. They have in January in Southern California, they have what we call jacket weather. You have to wear a jacket when the sun goes down. A jacket. There's no such thing. No one has a snow overcoat. No one
Yeah.
has snowshoes. No one has galoshes. So you get to Columbus, you leave Columbus, you're happy, and you move to California, you're thinking, maybe it's not so great here. You walk on the beach for a couple of days, and you're like, I can get used to this.
Do you think New York is done? Getting back to today, do you think New York is up? Do you think Chris Drury's done, or do you think there are still more moves to make if you're the Rangers GM?
No, I like about Chris Drury, Billy Guerin's the same way. I like some of these younger guys that they're getting after it. He's going to spend that money first chance he gets, in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a cap team again, probably in 2 weeks, as soon as he can spend the money intelligently. So, no, I think they're go for it guys. The profession's becoming that anyway, because there's so little time and patience for GMs. The profession is tipping that way anyway. Make moves quicker, make bolder moves, take bigger chances, because you're going to get fired if you don't win.
You know that's an interesting comment. So I was having a conversation with someone today about managers, and we know the GMs that make their moves early. I mean, Jim Rutherford won a Stanley Cup in 2006, making moves early, and the whole league has sort of followed. And this person said to me, I wonder how much the Four Nations tournament might complicate things. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, this is going to be like a highly competitive, very physical series, the Four Nations. And he said, I wonder if there are teams that won't make major moves until they know that their players have gotten through the Four Nations with a clean bill of health. Like the one team that I thought of when he was talking to me about this morning were the Winnipeg Jets. Like the Winnipeg Jets flying high, it's great. They're in a tucked out. They've put together enough points now. They'll probably make a playoff spot based on what they did early in the season. But what if they lose Connor Hellebuck? Like we all remember what happened in 2006 at the Olympics when Dominik Hasek, after about 10 minutes, got injured, and then that completely scotched the Ottawa Senators' chances of winning a Stanley Cup. Do you think the Four Nations tournament complicates anything? I.e., are you going to make a big move knowing that you're going to have players going to the tournament, or are you going to make a move for a player who is going to the tournament knowing there's a chance they might get injured?
Well, at every Olympics, there's been a player who had a serious injury that was a
Yeah.
major player. Tavares 1 year,
Yep.
Matthias Olin 1 year. So at every tournament of consequence, we've had at least one major injury that impacted on a team's ability to win games. I don't think that factors into it. I don't think you can think like that. Besides, a large number of players in this tournament will studiously avoid contact at every opportunity.
Really? You think so? Because I kind of look at this one, and maybe I'm just putting too much into Canada versus USA and thinking about 1996 and, Kachuk and Guerin and Lemieux and Primo, and thinking to myself, they put the jersey over the shoulders. You forget about the NHL, and you're just doing this for country. You think it's going to be no contact hockey?
No, I think there's going to be a lot of both, but there will be players who studiously avoid contact. I'm not saying the tournament's going to be like that, but it's not a. You look at these rosters; they're not a bunch of crushers. These guys are all quality players, and there's not a lot of size on any of the rosters comparatively. So it's going to be a. There's going to be plenty of hitting. That's the way the league works. It's the way a tournament like this works. Everyone will be happy with the amount of hitting, but it's going to be based on. You're going to win based on skill.
I have a question for you from our chat from Aaron Slattery. Burke, this one's for you. I'd like to hear Burke's thoughts on the offer sheet boys in St. Louis. St. Louis, by the way, traveling to Edmonton this weekend. We think of Philip Broberg, of course. There were a cut. Dylan Holloway is the other one. So Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg on their way to Edmonton as members of the St. Louis Blues for Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday. They went as a pair. There were two other teams that were prepared to offer sheet both of them. I'm very much of the belief that Calgary was one, which would have added a whole new wrinkle to the Battle of Alberta. That has not been denied by anybody. How did you feel about how the St. Louis offer sheets went down in the summer? Really put Edmonton in a tight spot.
Well, they could have matched on one of them. They didn't have to. They didn't have to say no to both of them. They made an intelligent decision based on their cap decision. What I thought when it happened was creativity has value. Doug Armstrong was creative here. He put by putting both players in play, he put them in a tough spot in Edmonton. And they took advantage of that and walked on both players. But it's very easy now. Broberg's having a really good year. It's easy to say now, well, look, they should have matched. This is a guy that played part-time up until this year. Played part-time in the minors, didn't play big minutes. It was a real iffy player. I liked him, but Doug Armstrong loved him, and he's turned out to be a much better player in Louis than he was in Edmonton. So the value there is that the team did their scouting, not that they used the money to advantage maybe over an unsuspecting player. They just had a lower assessment of this player than someone else did, which is the GM. That's his credit. Good for Army.
Yeah.
Dylan Holloway, to me, is a player that's a good player, not worth that money in their mind, so they decided not to match. I don't think it's hurt them not having those two players. I think they both played well for St. Louis, but they didn't have that impact in Edmonton.
Do you feel that you've gotten a sort of that you've been misinterpreted on how you feel about offer sheets over the years?
I don't really care. I've never thought about it. I'm blessed by imperviousness to. I don't really care what people think.
Yeah.
I don't really care what people think. So if they misinterpret, say Brian Burke's all wrong. I was upset about the offer sheet because it messed up Getzlaf and Perry's contract by overpaying Dustin Penner. It messed up my cap situation for a player I didn't think was worth that money. I think history bore me out on that. The personal stuff about not calling me, that was just being crotchety.
Let's get ready to grumble. Is that what you're saying in that case?
Yeah, well, Kevin was the guy that started that whole thing about fighting, so I want to make that clear.
If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.